Over the past 3 years, I've created my very own seven-figure course creation brand by creating and launching 5 different courses. So what I wanted to do right now is I wanted to lay out the top 5 lessons that I've learned from creating my very own seven-figure course creation brand. And the reason for why I want to share these lessons to you is to help you save some time and money from the highly valuable lessons that I've learned over my own journey. Because I know if you're like me and when you're first starting and thinking about this whole course creation thing, there's just so many different questions that run through your mind. And just in case we haven't met yet, my name is Aaron Young from Seven Figure Coaching, and everything I'm sharing with you in this video comes from my experience, as I said, of growing my other YouTube channel and coaching brand, which is all about teaching people how to build businesses with Google Ads. And I launched my first course 3 years ago. And as I said, since then, we've got our own seven-figure brand. We've sold over 4,500 courses. And what this channel is focused on, it's focused on teaching you the lessons that I've learned from my journey. And what I want to also do is further to what I'm teaching in this lesson is I want to help you further. And if you go to sevenfigurecoaching.co/start, and that's the number seven, so sevenfigurecoaching.co/start, you can get access to some extra free training where I take you into some deeper levels of how you can not only create your first course, but also get your first sales. So enjoy this teaching that I'm sharing with you now, but don't forget that after you've listened to this teaching, to follow the link in the description or go to that website, sevenfigurecoaching.co/start. All right, let's get into the top 5 lessons that I've learned that it's going to help you save some time and money as you start to create your own courses. And the most important lesson that I've learned is that you need to create your course to be very specific for your target audience. Thankfully, 4 of my 5 courses have had a really, really successful launch. But the one launch that wasn't successful didn't come down to the quality of the course. It just came down to that course was not fully aligned with the audience that I was wanting to reach. So it's highly, highly important that you start with the end in mind. And the way that I've learned to do this is that you want to get yourself into the way that your target audience would be thinking. What questions are they going to ask? What things do they want to learn? What problems are they going to face? And if you can tailor your course to answer those questions and provide solutions for those problems, you're going to have a successful course. Let me give you an example of a successful launch that I had. And as I mentioned before, it was all about teaching people how to create Google Ads campaigns. But what I really wanted to focus on is I wanted to focus on beginners. So for the first course that I launched, it wasn't targeted at people who'd been doing Google Ads for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. This was specifically targeted for people who had been doing Google Ads for 2 to 3 years, or in some cases, never done any Google Ads at all. And the way that I created that course is I was able to think back not only about the questions that I had when I was starting Google Ads back in 2010, but also about the different people that I'd helped and coached through my consulting business. I just went through all of those common questions. So if you're creating a course and it's something that you've already taught people through, I can guarantee that you've already got the outline of your course. Just think about, what have you taught other people through? What is the process that you need to take people through? And if you can focus your course on that rather than being too broad, you're going to be a long way along the journey to success. So in my suite of courses, I've got courses that are targeted at beginners, and then I've got other learning tracks which are targeted at people who are more experienced. It's very, very rare that you'll be able to create a course which can fit both of those markets. So for someone who's just starting out in your niche or in your industry versus someone who's an expert. So it's highly, highly likely that you're going to have different levels of courses to help people at different learning levels. And that's one of the most important things that you really need to focus on when you're creating a course, is not only thinking about the type of market, so the type of people they are, what are their interests, what are their hobbies, what are their skill sets, but also thinking about their experience and making sure that you're targeting that course and the learning inside of that course for their relevant experience. And that brings us to this second most important lesson. And this was thankfully a lesson that I learned not from one of my own mistakes, but from seeing the mistakes of other course creators. What this lesson is you need to focus on practical outcomes. The reason for why I actually got the confidence to start my own course and create my own course is that a good friend of mine paid a lot of money for a course to learn about how to do Google Ads. And what they did is they did a massive, big digital marketing course. And it was, there was so much content. There was hours and hours of learning. It took them, I think from memory, about 2 months to complete the course. And that was giving a good half a day to a day a week. So it was a lot of content that they had to go through. The only problem was it was all theory with no practical outcomes. So as I mentioned, this was about a digital marketing course. But at the end of that course, if you ask this person, the friend of mine who was a smart person and who is still a smart person, if they could create and plan and launch, say, for example, a Google Ads campaign, they wouldn't have any idea on where to start. So, what you really need to think about when it comes to the online course creation space, you're not wanting to teach people to attain a certificate or to attain some level of official learning or official certificate. What you're wanting to teach people and the power of an online course and the reason for why people buy online courses is they want to have a step by step guide. So, for your courses, do not focus on theory. You will have to obviously have some theory components of your course, but it's all about having practical outcomes that they can then apply to their personal life or to their business. And the way that I think about this is I want you to think about that your course should be like a Google Maps direction or a Waze app, whichever one you want to use, where you put in a destination of where you want to go, and then it gives you a step by step guide from where you are to where you need to be. And the other reason why I like to give you that example is because just think about it when you're, listening to the instructions from Google Maps or from Waze or whatever map-based app you are using, is it doesn't give you any unnecessary information. In fact, if you've ever been on a longer drive, you may not sometimes hear anything for a good half hour or 45 minutes, especially if you're on the highway. And then when you need to take your next action, it gives you the warning and it gives you the steps that what you need to complete. That's what your course needs to be. It needs to be the step-by-step guide which gives you the most logical, thought out process of how to complete that task. And leading on to that is point number 3. And that is that within your courses, you want to include practical tasks. Now, this will look different for every type of course because it depends on what you're teaching in the course. Practical tasks would look very different from, some of my courses who are teaching people how to create Google Ads campaigns versus if you're teaching someone how to set up your own YouTube studio or if you're teaching someone how to play guitar. So depending on what you're teaching them, this will look different, but the principle is the same. Think about it in your courses. What you want to have a level of practical teaching, and then you want to give them some sort of task that they manually have to complete. Let me give you an example. So for one of the courses that we've created, there's this part, I take them through the theory of how to write highly compelling ad copy. And then at the end of that lesson, I've created a Google Sheet for them that they can go and get access to and then create their own ad copies. Then in another course, which is all about teaching people how to sell their own online courses and how to create high converting landing pages. Once we finish that lesson about landing pages, I've got a questionnaire for them, which takes them through a series of questions that when they answer those questions, it becomes the basis for their sales copy on their website. So that's just 2 examples of how you can integrate that together. So you can integrate what you're teaching them in terms of the actual lessons, but then outworking that into a task that they can then use within that whole system of what you're trying to teach them. So what I always try to do is that in every single module or every single lesson, however you want to work it in your course, there's also not only a learning part, there's a doing part where we're getting them to apply and to put into place what we're actually teaching them to do. Number 4. So far we've been focusing on, how to put courses together, but now I want to talk about practically of how you actually record the course. And the biggest lesson that I've learned is that you do not want to overcomplicate the course creation process, especially for people who have never been involved in talking into a microphone or talking in front of a camera. That is the biggest thing that can hold people back from creating their own course, is because they just don't know how to do that process. Now, as I mentioned to you before, I've sold over 4,500 courses. We've generated, in multiple 7 figures of income from our courses. But when you actually go inside of my courses, what you'll find is that we created the audio on a free app, which is on my computer. I use Mac, so it's GarageBand. I then create the screen shares using QuickTime Player, once again, a free app. When we created our first course, thankfully now I've got a video editor who completes this task for us. But for the first 2 courses, in fact, we actually did the editing in Final Cut Pro. And because we didn't have any much money in the business, because we hadn't sold any courses yet, especially on our first course launch, we just used the free trial of Final Cut Pro, which lasts for 90 days. And then thankfully, we're able to sell enough courses that the first sales were able to go and buy that full package of Final Cut Pro. And then the only other expense that we had was a USB microphone. Now, I've since updated to a Rode mic. You can see this one in here probably. I think the whole setup cost me just under $300. But the first microphone I ever bought was a microphone, I think it was called a Blue Yeti, which cost me just under $100. So the whole course creation process doesn't need to be an expensive exercise. And the reason for why I do it that way is because when I started my own course creation journey, I bought two different courses. And one of them was just a PowerPoint presentation with a voice over the top. There were some face-to-face video elements around in the introduction and the course explanation, but in terms of the teaching modules, I was just watching a PowerPoint presentation with this course creator speaking over the top. I then bought another course, which was a highly edited, what I was going to call masterpiece, with him talking with different pop-ups and all of those different things. But when I came back to which course was more valuable in terms of learning outcomes, it was the course which was more simple. Because inside of your actual course, people will already, when they bought your course, they'll probably know who you are. They're already connected to your message and they trust you. What they want is they just want learning. So you don't need to impress them with different editing tricks and try to keep them engaged. They've already bought the money, so they are engaged. So when it comes to course creation and actually recording your course, don't think you have to overcomplicate it. Doing a talking voice with no video over a PowerPoint presentation, in many cases, is going to be all that you need. Now, once again, coming back to depending on what you're teaching, if you're doing a practical thing, like so you're teaching people, different elements of different skill sets for soccer, or teaching people about wood turning or how to play a guitar, you may need some extra video elements, but always think about what is the most simple way that we can do this so that it just removes any friction from you actually creating that course. And that brings us to the fifth and final lesson that I've learned, and that is that you should not start advertising your course until you've already got some sales. Now, the reason for why this is such an important one is because this is the big area where you can waste a lot of money really, really fast. Now, as I mentioned to you before, and if you know my story, you may know that I've been involved in digital marketing since 2010. And I also mentioned earlier in this video that my first course I created was about teaching people how to run Google Ads. What you may be surprised to know that is that I didn't start advertising that course on Google until we're already doing months of well over $80,000. And the reason for that is because I know that inside of digital marketing, that any money you spend on advertising, so whether that be through Google Ads or Facebook or any other platform, is that unless you know that you've got a high converting landing page and you've got your product and your pricing set right, that you're just going to be wasting money. The reason for that is because any money that you spend on advertising only magnifies what you're already seeing in your business. So if you've tried other avenues and you're not getting any sales, your course is not ready for advertising. What you want to focus on first is you're making sure that when people go to your website, that they are actually, filling out the forms that you need them to fill out. Then if you're getting them into an email sales funnel, that your email sales funnel is working, that your pricing is working. I also like to wait until I've had a couple of students actually complete the course. That way I can follow up with them and get some feedback and potentially get some testimonials, so that when we're advertising from a position of strength. Now, that always brings us to the question where people go, well, how do you get the first sales with no advertising? And that's why I'm a big believer in what I'm doing now, something like free content, where you're offering free content through YouTube, a podcast, or a LinkedIn profile, and you're building up your audience that way. And then when you start to get some sales from your email marketing and audience marketing alone, that's when you can go into a paid advertising campaign. So what I want to do with that to help you in that first process so that you're not wasting any money is I want you to go through and watch this next video, which will show you how you can build a seven-figure brand with no audience, because that's something when I started 3 years ago, I had absolutely zero audience. So in that lesson, I'm going to take you through the full step-by-step process of how you can build your own audience from scratch. And if you're listening to the audio version of this lesson, what I want you to do is if you go see the show notes, you'll have a link there to show you how you can watch that extra training. Once again, thank you for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. My name is Aaron Young from Seven Figure Coaching, and I look forward to seeing you on our next video. See ya.